It is my pleasure to introduce you to this man who has been really influential in my life. He's actually been there at some really significant parts of my life, and he's one of the greatest thinkers on the whole subject of the apostolic and apostles and all that. So, but I'll let him introduce himself a little bit more. So, Paul, welcome, and thanks for being here.
Yeah, well, I'm Paul Manwaring. I guess the best way to describe my life is it's been a little diverse, but so has Ian's. General nurse, psychiatric nurse, prison governor, 15 years on the leadership team at Bethel, which I'm actually still on the team, but came back to Europe to serve God in Europe and to pursue what I believe God has. So I guess a lot of passions. Organizational leadership is a huge piece of that. And this whole subject of the apostle, the apostolic, being sent is very dear to my heart, to say the least. So fun to be with Ian and hang out with him, as always. It's more fun in Ireland, but it is fun on here as well.
That is true. So Paul came to Ireland with us a couple of years ago, and we had a blast. So that was great. So Paul, the problem, like sometimes I wish that I had, God had placed this burden on my life for not pioneering, for actually saying, hey, I'm going to introduce everybody to a topic that's really nice. So I'll talk about identity and how you're amazing, and that feels like a lot easier than trying to convince people at times. And certainly it feels in our stream that we have to convince people at times of the importance of the fivefold, and even of the apostle, him or herself. And why is that important? It feels like in other traditions, whether it's some of the historic Christian traditions, it's not a problem. You can just call someone a bishop or archbishop or cardinal or whatever, and that's all okay. But when it comes to our little corner of Christianity, it can feel like we're always trying to say this is important amongst people that don't always feel like that. So the question is, why are apostles important?
Yeah, just a small question. One of the realities is, of course, you and I think, approach the same subject and have a lot of agreement, but we actually start at different ends of the spectrum.
Totally.
And I think that's okay. So for me, one of the reasons why the apostle is important is because the apostle's job ultimately is to create an apostolic culture and to raise up apostolic people. So I tend to approach it I ask people, are you apostolic? And a lot of people have a misunderstanding about that. So why is the apostle important? Well, Jesus is the first apostle.
Right on.
Jesus is the sent one. And Jesus actually said, as the Father sent me, I send you. So why is it important? Because fundamentally, Corinthians says, first apostles. Why first apostles? Not so much the person, not so much their status, but actually their assignment is to infuse every believer with the belief that they are sent to bring heaven to earth and to bring transformation to our world. So to me, that's where it begins. So whether you start with the one end of raising apostles, or you start at the other end by encouraging people that they need to understand that they're apostolic, it's absolutely essential, because it's the great assignment.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I think you're right on. I think we've talked about this, that for me it is raising up apostles. It's people will give me feedback. People like to give you feedback. And it's like, well, hey, apostles don't need trained or equipped. God just sends them. And we get that about prophets as well. The problem was Jesus actually spent 3 years training his apostles. And I don't know if any of us just sort of, get gifted and show up and don't need training. That was certainly, as your experience as a nurse and then a governor, it's, training was really important. So yeah, I think my emphasis is definitely, let's raise up apostles and let's release them on the world. But for me, it's probably the shift over the last probably 4 or 5 years has been, I want healthy apostles. It's not the ones that are just, getting the magnet on the side of their van and printing it on a business card and telling everybody what's wrong with them, or what's wrong with their church. It's actually people that are in healthy relationships with the local church and all that.
Yeah, and I think for me, one of the pieces of this that is really important is that when we start to focus on the fruit and the outcome of an apostle rather than the structure that's built around them, we end up with a greater success. And the other thing, I think, this is not quite answering the same question, but it kind of is. Why apostle is important. The thing I think that we miss is everybody understands the pastor's job is to equip the saints to be pastoral. The prophet's job, equip the saints to be prophetic. The evangelist's job, to equip the saints to be evangelistic. And the teacher's job, to equip the saints to be, my word, teachering, because you have to invent a word. But somewhere we miss that the apostle's job is to equip the saints to be apostolic. Now, I think if we grasp that, we would realize why we need to raise up apostles, because that shifts the emphasis from the apostle is a church planter or has networks or has a big ministry. None of that matters as much as using that ministry, that network, to equip the saints to be apostolic. So I think that that's a place that you can inject a higher value on the apostle, and therefore the need for them and why they're important.
I love it. I love the bits. Yeah. What are some of the misconceptions that you feel that are out there? Like, do you hear the same thing all the time, or do you hear the same objections or the same kind of questions from people?
Well, I mean, I think there are just some amusing things. Like, I get around some people and they've been to one apostolic event and they think that makes them an apostle, because and it is for me this real important thing that the apostle's job is that we all become apostolic. For me, apostolic is a mindset that is the result of coming under the influence of an apostle. So once we start to get that in the picture, we can get rid of some of the stuff. Now, there will be apostles who have big churches. There will be apostles who have big ministries, but those things don't make them apostles. And so for me, there's a number of things I look for. I do look for that awareness of being commissioned. I expect an apostle to have either an actual call or such a deep sense of being commissioned. So there's something that happens in that impartation that for me is fundamentally important. And then secondly, that it is about being sent from heaven to earth, and therefore to make earth like heaven. Yeah. Those two pieces are in there. When we focus on the structure and we say somebody's an apostle just because they have a bunch of churches or a large network or something like that, and less so, because you can do that and not have the characteristics that I think are required to be an apostle.
Yeah. So you had the honor of running with an apostle we're all very familiar with, running with Bill. What do you think was the mark of being in that environment for you? And did you notice any difference while your heart didn't change, like geographically, when you stepped out into what is definitely more of I would see it as more of a role of an apostle rather than simply being apostolic in what you're doing at the minute? Did you notice any shift? So what was the thing that marked it for you, being in Bethel, being with an apostle, and did you notice any shift when you moved to the UK?
Yeah, it's a huge question, isn't it? Now, I would say that the number one thing of being around Bill is he is the most focused man that any of us have probably been around. And that focus is fundamentally heaven on earth. And I heard him, and actually I think it was the first time I ever heard him say it was about 2 years ago, when he said, the Lord's Prayer on earth as it is in heaven is bigger than the Great Commission. The Great Commission fits into on earth as it is in heaven. So I think it is that absolute sense of I have the one thing, the one purpose, and that everything else steps into that. And I would say the other thing is his ability to truly empower. And it's summed up in a phrase, but it's the best way of saying it. Bill will say, I don't embrace your vision until I see that you embrace mine. And now that's not a harsh, controlling phrase. That is the heart of a father. And so empowerment for me is absolutely central to an apostle. An apostle who doesn't empower, in my view, is not. And one of the odd things is that we often see apostles are recognized because of the people they gather, but actually that's counterintuitive to what the word means, because the apostle is a sent one who sends people. So that's why for me empowerment is so important, because being sent and being empowered go together. So Bill is the most empowering leader I know, the most focused leader that I know, and he never changed the subject. And it's his ability to gather people around that. Now, Bill, I don't think I've ever heard Bill call himself an apostle, because he doesn't need to. And that for me is the simple piece. But Bill fits into a category which for me is a high end of it, and that is he is an evangelist, because he started life in evangelism. He is undoubtedly a teacher. He is a pastor, and he is prophetic. And then you wrap them all together with this high level apostolic calling on his life. So I would say that would probably be my experience of him. He's a lifelong learner. He's a steward of the presence of God. So that's in the mix for me. What's the difference I notice? Well, this might run into the slight risky, but my observation and the battle in Europe, I think, is related to this. Now, I've been involved in a couple of situations where there's been people who've suffered from quite serious betrayal, and some of my friends around that would say that it's an anti-apostolic or anti-apostle spirit. I think that's probably correct, but if I pull one piece out of it, this is what I notice. It's an anti-anointed man or woman of God spirit. And the reason I distinguish that is if I believe that the apostle has heard the Lord and has a deep sense of commission, the spirit that comes against them is one that says, what right have you got to say that God appointed you? Yeah. And that's the battle. And that battle of being able to sit in the room and saying, this is what God said. And you know this country, and you know Europe, and we tend to have more of a, the democratic church government, not the theocratic church government. And you can't have the apostle in the democratic church government model. Yeah. So that for me would be the battle. I don't know whether that helps or answer your question, but
yeah. I think it's really fascinating. Probably for the last year or so, I've been really, maybe 2 years, I've been really digging into the whole principalities and powers things and trying to understand the enemy, not to give him prominence, but so that we're fighting the correct enemy. And it's interesting, like the rebellion in Genesis 3 was basically who we would call the devil telling Yahweh, you got this wrong. Like, you've picked the wrong person. And it's interesting, and it's basically contempt. It's a level of contempt against God's chosen, and I kind of see that as being like the most devilish thing on the planet, is the sense, and within the church certainly, but it's outside the church. You see it in the political arena here. Even though we know that it's God that appoints kings and presidents and all that, we still have great contempt over God's choice at times. So, which is. It followed right the way through. It's even in the book of Job where the accuser says, I know you think he's great, but he's not really. it's this sort of contempt against the people that God have chosen. So it's interesting.
Yeah, Ephesians 4, obviously the great text on this is very clear. The fivefold are a gift of Christ to the church. And, so some of what I'll teach is I'll say to people, look, you're apostolic, because I start at that end.
Yeah.
And if you can't find it, if you don't have an apostle, then it's Jesus. He's the first apostle. And the gift comes from him. So it then starts to be, look, if you do what he did, say what he says, go where he goes, that makes you apostolic. And, so for me, it is about being commissioned. It is about knowing you're anointed, and you carry that assignment and you create the culture of raising up apostolic people. Once anything comes against that, it cancels out the effect of the apostle. So that's why helping the apostle to know that they have heard the call of God on their life and it's legitimate is one of the great battles, I think.
Okay. Yeah, so good. Love it a bit. Yeah. So what piece of advice would you give anyone who's just sort of like exploring the notion of so that to be clear, I think the difference. I get people saying to me, I might be an apostle when really all they've done is been around an apostle, that they're so apostolic it sort of vibrates. In our church we did one of the Michael Berger's tests on what you were, what fivefold you were, and I think like 70% of our church all came out as apostles. But just so someone who's exploring, someone who feels that they're an apostle, what's the next? How do they work that out, Paul? How do they actually find out whether they are? If it's not about church planting, if it's not about running a huge network, how does one find out whether you're an apostle or not?
I mean, I think you start to explore what you want the fruit of your life to be.
That's good.
And that for me is really where the emphasis comes from. What do I want the fruit of my life to be? When I think about, I've taught a little bit about destiny, and this is really about that. It's like, the great way of describing Jesus is he knew who he was. I am the way, the truth, and the life. He knew why he'd come, and he knew where he was going. But he also knew something else. He knew what the influence of his life would be, because he said, for God so loved the world that he sent me. So he knew he knew what the fruit of his life would be. So I would have somebody looking at, what do you want the fruit of your life to be? What do you want the impact of your life to be on the people around you and those that you lead? And I'd start there. And I'd probably be beginning to drill down. A lot of that would be around, what do you love? What are you passionate about? What's beautiful to you? What change would you want to bring to the world? What are the things that you would want to see changed in church or people's lives? And go from there. And I think that does awaken. The danger is, I think Chris Valentin says this really well. He'll say, everywhere he goes, people say, well, you're an apostle. It's like, no, I'm a prophet, but I'm so closely related to an apostle that you can easily mistake that.
Yeah.
But Chris is so confident in what he wants the fruit of his life to be that he doesn't get off track and go around saying, well, actually, I'm not a prophet anymore. I'm an apostle, Chris. No, he's a prophet. But he's been around such a great apostle for so long that he's an apostolic prophet, which of course is what we should all be, because the reality is, if it truly is first apostles, then you mark everyone that you're around with the apostolic, and you create apostolic pastors, apostolic teachers, apostolic doctors, etc., etc. So I would say, what do you want the fruit of your life to be?
That's so good.
And go from there.
So good. I love it. All right, we'll take some questions. So I think Kelly has one. So let's see what this is. Do you believe apostles are the mothers and fathers, or should we all be mothering and fathering?
Yes. Well, I think if an apostle isn't a mother or father, I'm going to question whether they're an apostle, because I think it's the very nature of the apostle is that it's relational. It's a huge element. It's one of the top 4 or 5 aspects of being an apostle would be a relational government. So they are going to mother and father. They are going to raise up sons and daughters. They are going to give those sons and daughters permission to go further than they have gone. And they are going to raise up sons and daughters who discover who they are. So yes, they are definitely going to be, but yes, we should all be mothering and fathering, because if we left it all to the 1 or 2 leaders in the church, we are in serious trouble.
Right. Yeah, I would totally agree, Paul. I think for me, there's always the reason I call it emerging apostles is because I think we have to give grace to people who aren't there yet. That it's that there's definitely a process with all of this, or a process with all of this kind of stuff. That we have to allow people. I mean, David has just asked this question. David's one of my hub leaders. What do you think about 20-year-old apostles? Well, it's really difficult. If I have the meta-narrative that apostles are mothers and fathers, it's really difficult to do that with 20-year-olds and expect them to be on the same kind of level as someone like Bill, or the same kind of maturity, even in that, as someone like Bill. So I think there's progression, and so I put the word emerging in because I want people to understand that there is a process to it, that it isn't just simply you're called and you're perfect, that you have this heavenly encounter calling you to be an apostle, or a prophet turning up in your room one night, which happened to me, and kind of like shook me a lot. And he wasn't that happy to be there and all this, but you have that encounter, but then it's like, okay, how do we walk this out? And I think sometimes one of the things I love about your approach is that you work on the character stuff. I think coming from an apostolic place, first of all, it means you're getting ducks in a row before you're actually getting to the person. So I kind of love that.
The problem is, though, that we as human beings tend to put these kind of lines. We want to put some sort of criteria in here, and for me, the kingdom removes those. And so let's take the 20-year-old apostle. Well, there's in my book, Things Fathers Do, there's a couple of chapters about overcoming lies on the way to becoming a father or mother. So, which would fit perfectly with the emerging apostle language, because it's like, okay, you're overcoming lies. What are the lies? I can't father, I don't have any kids. I can't father, I'm a woman. I can't father, I'm young. I can't father, I had a bad growing up experience. I can't father you because you're better at something than I am. Those are all lies we need to overcome. And I would put those in this conversation, because it's going to be a lot about context. Can you be a 20-year-old apostle? Yeah, easily, in the right environment, in the right context. But the human mind wants to put these lines and these categories instead of what I believe the kingdom does, which is, it's the whole thing about, I teach about being favorites. We're all favorites. Being a favorite isn't about fair. Being a favorite is being treated by a father or a mother according to the season of your life, your passions, and your destiny and assignment. So you can be a 20-year-old apostle because where you are, the season of your life, the people are around you, your destiny and your assignment, it works. So I try and remove the criteria. They get in the way.
That's so good. I love it. For me, the way I explain it is that, the Romans 12 gifts, some would call the Father's gifts. They're kind of like abilities. The Holy Spirit's gift are abilities. Juggling could be in there, but it's not, and nor do I think they're exhaustive. But Jesus's gifts aren't abilities; they're people, and I think it is the call of the person which becomes really important. So I know that Jim asked a question, Jim Heydrich here in San Diego. Could you speak to who's actually affirming a person's apostleship? In other words, who's actually calling you an apostle? I mean, it's really interesting. I teach that there should be three things that goes on. You need an internal sense. You need someone in authority. Usually it's a local, well, I hope it's a local church that's actually recognizing that, not some handmaidens of the bride, sect out there that's doing it. That it's actually a local church, because that seems to be the model in the New Testament, and certainly the early church. So you have an internal sense, you have your local church's sense, and it's also known by people around you. But it's interesting that Paul says in one of his letters to the Corinthians that he said to the church that you are my certificate of apostleship. That the reason I'm an apostle is because there is actually a church that's relating to me as an apostle. And that's kind of where the rubber hits the road. You can have a lot of prophets and apostles, but if they don't have particularly healthy local churches that are saying, you're my apostle, you're my prophet, whatever it is, then I think there is no certificate of apostleship. And for me, that is largely because there's been a whole generation, or maybe 2 or 3 generations, that have not been able to build trust with men and build trust and relationship with church leadership, that they've decided that they are first apostles, therefore everybody must buy. So yeah, I think it's...
Yeah, I thought you were going to say exactly the same as me. It was close, but I would say there's somebody who covers me, who I've submitted myself to. Mm-hmm. There's those that I am walking alongside as peers, and there are those that are following me. I put those 3 elements in there. I think that they're absolutely vital, and obviously the internal sense. I've actually begun to convert that as I talk to churches, because I've been involved in a couple of situations where they're reviewing their whole government structure. And what I've started to say is, I think you need 3 levels of accountability in your church. You need your internal eldership. Is everything being done legally and correctly? You need your city relationships with brothers and sisters, that you're going after your local city, and you need higher level apostolic, prophetic, global, keep pulling you up to a higher level. And I think it's related to the question.
So good. Love it. Nancy, who's up in Fresno. Hi, Nancy. Why are there so many churches that do not recognize the fivefold structure? No idea. I mean, I think we got to remember that if it's so many churches, we globally, we're, the way I put it is, you've got the Catholic Church, the Episcopalian Church, the whole Anglican community. You have the historical Greek, Russian, Ethiopian Orthodox churches. You've got Coptics, and then you've got the whole African American church. You've got Hispanic church here in the U.S., and they're all recognizing sort of Ephesians 4. What the historical church would call the ascension gift, how God governs on earth. And so I think, but we have this little corner of the market of the evangelical stroke charismatic stroke Pentecostal world. And within that, it's a pretty broad church, but a lot of the ones that recognize it are what non-denominational or independent congregations. And I think it's the independence thing that really speaks to all of that. I love Paul's idea of making sure that we have accountability. And I love your definition of accountability, Paul, so I won't steal it on you, but I love the notion that we're being accountable to people on a global scale and even citywide, and not just us doing our own thing over here in a corner, which is the epitome of the occult, actually. So that, I don't know if there's anything.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the wrong question. I think asking churches why they're not fivefold is the wrong question. I think the right question is, what are you building? if you start to identify what church you're building and what that church is, why that church exists, then you will by necessity need the fivefold to build it. So I believe that the church, end of, no denominational line, the church should be a place where people encounter God, become a part of a family, and are trained and equipped to change their world. Once you start to embrace that, you realize that you need people who lead encounters, worship, intercession, prophecy, healing, etc. You need people who are able to do family and relationship, and you need people to be trained and equipped and sent out to change the world. You need to do that. You need prophets, evangelists, pastors, teachers, and you need an apostolic culture, which is the job of the apostle to create the apostolic culture. So I think that the question is, what do you build? What should the church look like? Well, it should. I've never met a church leader of any denomination who has said, I don't want that church. A place where people encounter God, become a part of a family, and are trained and equipped to change their world. But the problem comes, we've reduced the church, and once you reduce the church to some of the structure and pastoral, teaching, administrative, you remove the need for the other gifts.
Love it.
You love everything. We're not even having a disagreement tonight.
Well, we could.
The funny thing is, we don't really disagree. We kind of we bounce around this from these two different angles, and then go, yeah, I think we're saying exactly the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think you described it at one point where we actually meet in the middle. You know, like there's. I start with apostles first, right? You're starting with apostolic first. That's it. I'm sticking to the Bible. You're doing your thing. I mean, that's all. So yeah, I mean that's kind of like that's my jam. That's your jam. So
yeah, and I actually do think we end up with exactly the same goal, which is we want there to be apostles in the church who equip the saints for the work of ministry. Without any shadow of a doubt whatsoever.
I mean, I love what Bill says about the Great Commission being a tool for, in G.K. Chesterton's words, the restored Eden. So the Edenic mandate being supreme. The whole notion of having. The word, I can't even remember what the word is in Greek, but it's the word for dominion. It's the word which is badly translated. Dominions, it's governance. It's like you have self-governance. It's the self-control thing. It's you're able to govern yourself, and this is how God wants us to govern the earth and respect, love the earth, love creation. So yeah, I love it.
I mean, the one thing that, and you touch on it there, and for me, it's probably one of the key pieces is it is no coincidence that there is, for want of a better word, an inner healing sonship move of God at the same time as an apostolic move of God, because you cannot have an apostolic move of God without sorting out identity, sonship, inner healing, because otherwise we'll revert to the old school top-down controlling model of the apostolic. So you have to have the two hand in hand, which is why the teaching on character, inner healing, sonship is absolutely central to teaching and raising up apostles.
Love it. I mean, I love the sonship piece so much, Paul. It was my takeaway when I first encountered Bethel. It was Jack Frost's book, which you're the guy that introduced the sort of Jack Frost stuff into the sort of Bethel bookstore and Bethel world. Was the whole spiritual slavery to spiritual sonship. It was the thing that impacted me most about Bethel's culture. Yes, honor, supernatural, amazing, but it is on this sort of foundation of sonship rather than a foundation of fathers and mothers. It's a foundation of sons and daughters, so even the fathers and mothers are showing up as sons and daughters. You've got, it's not that they grow older, it's just that they always have that posture. I simply love it.
And Jesus is the first apostle, but he's also the sent son.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Without sons being in submission to fathers, we actually don't have anywhere to go. So this is Zach. Zach's one of my hub leaders in Detroit, the Metro Detroit area. How do you pursue emerging in an environment where it's not an established paradigm?
You create a culture. You feed the culture. For me, paradigm is the biggest form of culture. I mean, paradigm shift is a mega culture shift. So it's changed the culture. You've got to gradually infuse the culture. Now that depends on your assignment, and it depends on your position in the organization. So my language will always be you change the culture to the point that you're having a greater impact for good than the surrounding culture is having an impact on you for the negative. And all of us will face that challenge is, am I making a greater impact for good than than the environment is, as it were, for the negative on me? So it's culture, and that's where I would start to list what are the characteristics of the apostolic. And I have my list, which are probably not a million miles different to yours, but that you change the culture, you create a culture. And actually, in a funny sort of way, it's kind of like it's where you and I meet. It's totally where you and I meet, because the emerging apostle needs to meet an apostolic culture. If the two don't happen, we've got a problem.
Yeah, Zach, I think it's not. John Wimber used to say, "Show me your puppies, and I'll give you your papers." And I think there's a negative side of that, but I think part of it was Wimber saying, "Hey, I don't care what you call yourself. I care about the results. So show me the money. Let's do it like that. Show me the money." I think in whatever environment, if you're actually seeing the cultural piece happening, if you're seeing heaven invading earth, if you're seeing people, if you're witnessing miracles, if you're witnessing this sort of people but getting excited about their destiny and about transformation, like personal, city, regional transformation, if you start to see all that, if people start to see all that thing happening around you, and they know that it's happening around you, the way Zach knows this, but it people smell it on you. They just smell that they smell heaven on you. And then I think it's actually not a huge stretch to just embrace the fivefold or embrace the apostle. The problem is when people want to embrace as an apostle in an environment that doesn't recognize them, and they fight that battle instead of fighting the battle for heaven. Instead of saying, okay, well, we're going to put this aside. I personally believe titles are important. But they're not as important as the main thing. So keep the main thing, go after heaven, go after all the hallmarks of an apostle, and I think it's easy. So, well, easier. Keep the main thing. So,
and I think, work out what that main thing is. I mean, three things for me that I definitely want in the mix are the value for the unseen, the confronting of the impossible, and embracing mystery. Because if those three are being removed from the environment, they're probably being removed by a teaching gift that's non-apostolic, a pastoral gift that's non-apostolic. Whereas the apostolic and prophetic enables me to value the unseen, embrace the mystery, and stand in front of the impossible.
So good. So we're not going to get to everybody's questions. Forgive me if you've asked a question and it's not there, but I want to address Alan's. I have a call to be an apostle. What would your advice be to me? So we are launching. I am unashamedly promoting our emerging apostles hubs that are coming up. So we're actually launching today. We'll put links. Make sure you're signed up for our emails. Go to buildingcontenders.com, like our Facebook, and you'll hear something about it. But we're launching 4 hubs around the United States, for 9 months starting in October. So we're super excited about it. The guys that are hub leaders are people that are guys and gals that are hub leaders are ones that have actually done one of my schools before. And I invited a number of them to do it. And we have 4 this round. So it should be fun. You get to be on a call with me where I teach you all of Paul's stuff. And I steal all of Paul's stuff. No, I don't. Somewhere. And
you're welcome to
it. Thank you. And and then you'll be in with your hub leader. My emphasis is on deployment, not simply that we walk around being overtrained. I believe in being overtrained. As a former police officer, I believe we all should be overtrained and underdeployed. But I also believe that means we need to be deployed. So yeah, that would be the first step. I'm also giving my book away, which is Equipped for Glory, for free. You just have to pay shipping and handling, and it's legit shipping and handling. It's not shipping and handling $25. It's not. It's just simply to cover postage on the envelope. So yeah, that I think would be a great next step for you. But anything finally you want to add, Paul?
I find somebody more anointed than me in the gift of the apostle, and I would make sure that I spend time in true apostolic cultures.
That's good. So Paul, if people want to stay connected with you, they want to buy all your products, they want to sign up for all your courses, being someone who's in an apostolic stuff, if they're like, hey, I want to be closer to this guy, how do they do that?
PaulManwaring.com, or follow me on the usual Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. But PaulManwaring.com's got my resources on it, and my blogs on it, and such like. So yeah, or follow me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I'm reasonably consistent in throwing out resources and stuff. So yeah.
Love it. All right. Well, bless you guys. Any questions? You can still post them on Facebook, and one of us will get around to answering this. So bless you guys.